She's been sitting next to me.
All right, good evening, everyone. It's 5:30. We're officially on air. Thank you to the technical all set down. Welcome to the Select Board meeting / Budget Committee meeting. Tonight, I'm Tyler Ward. With me are fellow Select Board members Bill Taylor, Bill Kennedy. We have Town Administrator McStay here, and Alec Croyt's assistant to the Town Administrator is taking minutes. Everybody else that works in town is here too. So we all know each other, right? So you're on air, so watch what you say. And first, so we'll get into the budget hearing momentarily, but first up we had a quick add to the agenda. Julie Zimmer's here to bring attention to Senate Bill 563. Thank you for calling that to our attention. And,
Thank you. This bill came through a couple years ago, and you signed this practically very same letter in opposition to it. It's back, and we'd like to ask you to do that again. It's to our senators and representatives opposing what is called the anti-sanctuary city bill, which is a misnomer, but we'll get into that later. Dear New Hampshire senators, we the undersigned serve the Granite State as local officials. We represent many of the same constituents as you and enjoy a similar obligation to ensure the safety of our communities. It is from this obligation that we urge you to oppose SB 563. As part of our commitment to ensuring safety, we have taken steps to eliminate biased policing and ensure that all of our residents feel safe and welcome. So has the New Hampshire State Police through its 2019 fair and impartial policing policy. Without the ability to enact these policies, community members who may lack documentation for themselves or may have family or friends without documentation may be reluctant to come forward to our law enforcement officers when they are a victim of or witness to a crime. This makes us all less safe. Every person from every community should feel safe to engage with law enforcement for any reason, even if they are not a victim of or have not witnessed a crime. In addition to having serious commandeering issues, SB 563 would undermine the proactive steps we as local officials have taken to strengthen the safety of our communities and improve community relationships. And I have a list here of 3 examples of the existing ordinances. One from the town of Hanover, number 38, fair and impartial police policing. One from the city of Lebanon, ordinance 2020-19, welcoming ordinance. And the town of Harrisville approved a similar ordinance at a town meeting. I won't go into that, but I've given you the text. In addition, many towns and cities throughout the state, Concord, Laconia, Dover, Nashua, to name a few, have enacted resolutions which express the community's desire that all visitors and residents experience welcome and safety within the municipality. There's another example from Somersworth, New Hampshire. This bill is also an unfunded mandate which would require state and local police to do the work of the federal government concerning immigration enforcement. It imposes these obligations without any funds for training and compliance. And municipalities would be subjected to possible lawsuits that will force communities to spend money for lawyers for violations of its broad and even ambiguous terms. There are about over 20 signatures on it right now from school boards, mayors, aldermen, city councilors from Dover, Somersworth, Manchester, Concord, Portsmouth, and other cities. And I will leave that with you and the information about how to sign it. And thank you very much.
Okay, yeah, thank you, Julie. This is Yeah, we are familiar with this. The town of Peterborough also has a couple of ordinances that were signed into law several years ago regarding welcoming atmosphere type terminology. So we have the context, so we're allowed to, on our own. We don't have to make a vote on tonight or anything, but if you're interested, just sign up. Yeah, thank you for bringing it to our attention.
There's also a police department version of this, which I think we talked about a couple of years ago. You were going to wait and see how the State Police Association came out on it. And if I'm not mistaken, I believe they decided that they would leave that to the municipalities.
That is correct. And many police chiefs have already signed off in opposition of this bill. And for the record, I also oppose this bill.
Okay, if I could have your email, I'll send you the thing for the sign-in.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
That's great.
Great. All right, with that, let's start the public hearing. I make a motion that we enter a public hearing regarding fiscal year 2025 budget and proposed bond.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. At this point, I'd like to welcome Rick Lesser, Chair of the Budget Committee, to introduce the Budget Committee.
Thanks, Tyler. In the peanut gallery, Don Parkers, Carl Bevazzino, and then all the way to my far right, Leslie Lewis, Mandy Sliver, Liz Clark, Hal Lenos, Dick Reynolds, and Andrew Osterman. And do I just turn it over to Nicole and get things going?
All right. So tonight, we're doing three things. We're going to be holding the budget public hearing, which will be a review of the proposed budget. The bond public hearing, which is a review of the proposed fire and ambulance station project bond, and consider a few different bonding options that we have. And then thirdly, we'll be reviewing the draft warrant articles and taking votes to recommend from the Select Board and the Budget Committee on the same. So just to summarize the process, back in September of 2023, town staff began the process of creating the draft fiscal year 25 budget. After that, in fall of 23, staff began meeting with the Capital Improvements Plan Committee so that we could look at the long-term capital needs and how they would impact the town, not just this coming year, but in years ahead. In November of 23, staff met with the Select Board to review the economic conditions and set the basis for the FY25 budget, which include looking at all sorts of the usual cost drivers such as electricity, diesel, heating fuel, the health insurance, pension, all the different kinds of insurances that we carry, as well as making COLA and merit recommendations based on a number of different factors, but most particularly the Northeast Consumer Price Index and the 2024 Social Security COLA increase. In December of 23, we had a complete draft budget, a draft of the total budget, which was posted to the town's website and submitted to the Select Board and Budget Committee, and then through the month of January, town staff presented the proposed budgets to the Select Board and Budget Committee at joint meetings. A final draft of the budget has been posted as of February 7th, and that is available on the website for anyone to take a look at, as well as the CIP plan and other related documents. So just again, do a quick review of the form of the budget. The proposed total budget is made up of multiple budgets managed by 4 different fund types, each with different funding sources. General fund budgets funded by fees and taxation is voted on at town meeting. It includes most of the departments that you see represented here: administration, finance, planning and building, the town clerk, IT, recreation, the tax-supported portion of recreation, the library, the police, fire, ambulance, and emergency management, as well as public works administration and general services. We then have enterprise funds. The water and wastewater divisions are operated out of the enterprise funds, which are 100% funded by user fees. It's included with the general budget and voted on at town meeting, but it's funded entirely on its own. The recreation budget's also partially supported by a revolving fund. That is 100% funded by user fees, and that includes the community center. We always present the budget with the total budget for review, but it's not voted on by town meeting. That's under the control of the Select Board. Then we got the smaller little funds. We had the PEG Station revolving fund, which again is 100% supported by Comcast franchise fees in this case, which is also presented with the total budget but not voted on by town meeting. And the Pay As You Throw Special Revenue Fund, which is also 100% supported by the purchase by fees from the purchase of the Pay As You Throw bags. However, it is voted on by a separate warrant article at town meeting because it's special. The cost drivers in this year's total budget are really, there's two categories here, and we'll go through the regular category first. We have the expenditures. Health insurance is up 5.5%, workers' compensation is up 15.9%. Our heating fuels, we use their actual usage numbers over a number of years and multiply that by our current rate. We did the same with diesel and gasoline. Our debt service has increased by $112,437, and that's due to our new debt. We have the highway garage renovation project that's underway and the fire station design project, which you're going to hear about at some length. And then we have on the other side the cost of living and merit increases to salaries. We're recommending a 2% COLA and a 2% merit. COLA is applied across the board to every salary line. Merit is given to the employees after an annual review and an evaluation of their job performance. We base those numbers on many factors, including the Northeast CPI for September 23, which was 3%, Social Security's cost of living, which is 3.2%, the average of the local towns adjustments, which is at 4.6%, with their average COLA at 3.1% and their average merit at 2.5%. I also referenced a few of the larger salary surveys that are put out by that are gathered from large employers across the country. I used two different ones, one which has the WTW, which surveys over 2,000 respondents, and the Mercer with planning survey, which is more focused on healthcare employees. It's more helpful in some of our departments. The other big driver, though, is the ambulance service. We needed to move that into the operating budget this year for some significant reasons. First one is the transfer program. Transfer program started as a pilot program in 2011. That was always operated secondary to the 911 service, which we provide, but we used the excess capacity that we had in our staffing to run it. And the revenues significantly subsidize the cost of the ambulance services operations since that time. However, beginning in 2020, we had difficulty maintaining staffing to the point where we were forced to suspend the transfer service in June of 2023 due to our staffing crisis. Fortunately, our staffing, we're not losing more staff at this point. We're starting to pick up additional staff, but it is slow going. And we are still suffering from shortages in staff on a regular basis. Our other challenges is the ongoing decline in the ambulance insurance reimbursements to the ambulance service and an increase in 911 call volume. There have been also a number of legislative efforts that have created even more uncertainty. In 2023, saw the introduction of HB 373. Fortunately, that one was voted inexpedient to legislate. However, it's kind of been reintroduced, but broken up into three different bills. HB 1081 and SB 407 both require insurance to pay the ambulances directly. SB 407 is the one that looks like it's probably got some legs. It's currently being reviewed for amendment, so I'm not exactly sure what the final language of that bill is going to be, but we're certainly keeping an eye on it. And SB 409, which is would be a benefit to us, would increase Medicaid payments and add conditions for payment eligibility. So again, looking to see where that one goes. But we've responded to the uncertainty in the ambulance service in a few different ways. First thing that we did was suspend the ambulance service CIP until at least fiscal year 2026, and we're reevaluating the CIP. The revenue shortfall has been distributed across all the towns that we serve, including Peterborough. And we've moved the ambulance service expenditures and revenue into the general fund, which will allow us to draw from other parts of the budget if there is a more dramatic loss of revenue. And we've also left the ambulance CIP in the ambulance revolving fund, so even though it's zeroed out, the revolving fund will still exist after town meeting. Any questions about the ambulance service before I move on? So this is how the fiscal year 2025 proposed total budget breaks down. There's the general fund, total expenditures of $14,913,892, less the expected revenues of $5,589,298, brings us a net to raise and appropriate of $9,324,594. That's significantly up due to moving in the ambulance service. And then you can see all the other funds are self-supporting and so have a zero required taxation associated with them. And then it's a little much smaller font, but here's the net change by department. So the administration department, you'll see the expenditures and then subtract the revenue. That revenue includes all the regular state and federal grants that we get. I've just added those together because we need to go somewhere. So you'll find them there. And you'll see that there's been a decrease, a difference of $101,000, which is, most of that's just a difference in the revenues. And then planning's up 5%, town clerks down 1%, IT 5%, finance up 18%, that's mostly debt service. Recreation down 5%, there's a related increase in the revolving fund, so it balances out more or less at the end. Library, it's up 3%, police is up 8%, most of that is related to staffing costs, as well as because we had a half year, we had budgeted for a half year of a captain in this year's budget. Next year, we're budgeting for a full year promotion of a number of different employees instead of bringing in a captain. So that's why you see the difference there. There's also a little bit of an increase there for purchase and installation of vehicle charging and a couple of other small items. Software related and whatnot, yes. Fire and emergency management is down 11%. And the ambulance service, this is a little tough because you're really looking at kind of, it's not apples and oranges, but it's definitely apples and pears. Last year's ambulance numbers are the revolving fund numbers. So you see that more or less the expenditures equal the revenues. This year we're looking at projections of significantly less revenue, $923,000 difference between what we're expecting to need to spend and what we're expecting to need to raise and appropriate. But we also zeroed out the special warrant article. So that was about $450,000 that we zeroed out there. It's actually a little bit more than that. So it's all rolled into the general fund now. And then Public Works, the dramatic difference there really has very little to do with an increase. It's actually a decrease in their operating budget. What you're seeing there is a difference between the TIF revenues being taken out. There was TIF revenues for a special project in the current year. Those TIF revenues are not expected in the upcoming year because of some of the special warrant articles that we have seeking to establish the expendable trust funds, which will help to avoid big jumps like this in the future. And I'll explain those a little bit more when we're reviewing those warrant articles. But that's a department by department look at the budget. And then lastly, have just another way of looking at the budget. This is a chart that was requested by Al Lenos, and we found it useful to take a look at, graphically. You can see the expenditures, the different types of expenditures, year over year by percentage on the left side. And you can see that, depending on the year, there's a big difference in where those dollars are going. And then when you look at the dollars on the right-hand side, that's just showing the increase year over year and what drives those increases. Again, those same budget categories. Any questions on the general fund budget?
What percent are we looking at over last year?
In total?
Both revenues and expenses.
Sorry.
Well, expenditures are 100%, so they were last year too.
Yeah.
Nicole, including
Yep,
our funds,
thank you.
3.11.
3.11.
Sorry, say that again?
3% 3.11.
1%. And that's the total budget, including all funds, so that's all of the revolving funds, the special revenue funds, all of them together.
Just to note, our surrounding towns are looking at anywhere between 4 and 10% increases in their budgets.
Yep.
Could you please review the increase or the overall costs in the finance group? It was about three-something million as I saw it.
Yeah,
Just a quick overview of that.
most of that is debt service related.
Okay, that's where I was going with
Yep.
the bulk of this.
That and health insurance.
And health insurance, yes.
Yeah, all insurance products are in the finance.
They're in the
So
department.
that's,
Okay.
yeah, so that's where that 5.5% health insurance shows up, the 5.5% increase, which is the biggest one. Dollar-wise, but percentage-wise, the 15% increase to property and liability is dollar-wise not insignificant.
What, workman's comp in there too?
That's in there as
Yes.
well. All the insurance products are in there.
So it was 150.
I'm sorry?
I didn't mean to interrupt.
The total finance increase was 152,000, 112,000 was debt service.
Yep.
That's gross.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Somewhere in our deliberations, I remember noting a $200,000 projected revenue for ambulance transfer services.
Mhm.
Did I mistakenly read that?
Nope, it's in there. We're still hoping. We're hoping to get that. We are still doing some transfers. So we do some emergency transfers at a community hospital for the higher acute, more acute patients. But it's certainly, what?
We did one today.
Did one today. There you go. So, but we're certainly not doing them at the rates that we were doing them in the past.
Yeah, I think the response was that there were expected to be a couple per month for a total of 24, or a projection of 24 for the year. Is that correct?
It's been super variable, that's the problem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We've had 7 or 8 one month and then none the next, so.
But, okay. On a per service, what does that yield? It's not $20,000, is it?
So, again, speaking in generalities, transfers are longer distances, so a significant portion of the bill is mileage at $23.44, I think it is per mile, per loaded mile. Although that's discounted by auto insurance. Also, the majority of our transfers now, particularly, well, actually, I should say all of our transfers now, we're doing emergent or ALS1 or ALS2, which are billed at a higher rate. I don't know what that total revenue stream is per, because again, there is an enormous amount of variability there. But I don't, I know that the numbers we're looking at for that, and I can get more info if you need it, we're also providing in concert with EMAX, with Dennis Allen from EMAX Medical Billing, looking at our historical numbers and the acuity levels of what's anticipated. A big part of that also is driven by who winds up at the hospital.
Just struck me that the per incident was very high. Revenue potential. You're only going to do 24 of them a year, maybe 200 grand, that's significant. But anyway, thank you.
Any other questions? All right. Well, at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Seth to go through the fire station bond.
Yes, you do.
Okay.
At this point, I'm going to turn it over to Ed to go through the fire. All right. I have to stand, as you all know. And I'm going to apologize in advance because a lot of you have heard this a lot of times over the last 12 months. But I switched it up. I changed it up a little bit because I think the topic obviously tonight is how do we get to the conversation about the $12.1 million bond ask that you're going to be considering here this evening and then at town meeting. So try to add a little bit more flavor here. And I don't have my safety blanket architect with me, so I'll do my best. But I have added a little bit more color here. So we won't read through all these names, but I personally feel it's very important to continue to recognize people who give of their time, volunteer and staff and others over a course of a lot longer than what's up on the screen, because it dates back to 2004, and even before that, actually. The first study, the formal study was 2004 that started identifying this need, but this had been discussed, as Nicole and I were discussing earlier today, as far back as when the fire department moved into its current facility. That was going to be a temporary move. We're talking about, what year did they move in, do you know?
72.
72. So in 1972, this community knew that it needed a new fire station, but they knew they got a little bit of time, so nevertheless, 50 years later, we're still talking about a new fire station. So, but these people have helped to contribute to make a very, I think, a very responsible project that will be considered hopefully this year at town meeting. So let me quickly, and I haven't done this yet, but I want to do this real quick. I've sort of mentioned names, but I really want to call attention to the folks on the building committee particularly, and I'll talk about all these other names in a second. But those are the folks up on the screen who have given a tremendous amount of time since sometime, we'll go through the timeline in a minute, but after 2022's town meeting, and we knew we were going to be advancing and moving forward with trying to develop a design that our community can be proud of, that meets our goals. And these people have given a tremendous amount of time. I haven't totaled the hours up, but it's been dozens of meetings and a lot of travel, a lot of one-on-one conversations, a lot of emails, and a lot of extra work. In fact, this is an excerpt from this little brochure. We've had 2 iterations, but it was mostly building committee, Carl, Mandy, and others supporting that effort to put together this nice little pamphlet, which has a lot of details, which I've actually borrowed tonight and put into this presentation because I can't say it better than they put a lot of time into it. So I'm going to read through a lot of those for you because I think it's important for you to understand what goals have been met by the project in its current iteration, leading to the value of this project as it is. So in any case, the project team is the building committee, town staff, myself, Foss to a degree, I suppose, a little bit. He's consulting on one element. Danik has worked on a lot of PR, really has helped us with finances. Ed and a lot of the staff, Brad, John are here. Nicole has worked on this. Everybody in the building committee, other staff members. A lot of people have contributed a lot of time to try and put this thing together because it's a big ask and it's a big commitment on the part of this town. Our architect, which you've met numerous times, if you've gone to any of the forums, it's SMP Architecture. You'll have a chance to talk to them again. We have another forum coming up. Harvey Construction is helping us in the pre-construction phase to keep us within our budget target and help us make good choices to keep us on track for our financial goals, but also make sure that we're constructing something that will last a long time. We felt it very important to have construction expertise through the process. Oil and Tanner was selected as civil engineers. We've worked very, very closely with them on the site considerations as they influence the building itself. Resilient Buildings Group had done a number of workshops with energy groups in town as well as the building committee to help us hone in on a project that meets the community's 2030 renewable energy goals. Ironwood Design is the landscape architect. McFarland Johnson is the structural engineer. Miller Engineering and Hager are the geotechnical soil scientists that help us figure out what kind of foundation that this facility would need. So pretty big team, a lot of people involved. But tonight, we're talking about the financial considerations of the fire station. We're not talking about the design tonight, but there is now scheduled. Last time I updated, we didn't have a schedule quite yet, and we're going to be sending some more information about this soon. On the 27th at the library, same venue as last time, same time, 1833 room. Project team's coming together, and we're going to do another public output session, take more feedback on where the design is at this point, and hopefully advance from there. But important, hundreds of people have attended those and have given a lot of input to help us craft at least the model that I'll show you tonight. We're in the conceptual phase of the project, which is advanced far enough to allow for confidence in the project's budget. That's why we're here tonight. There is still time to influence the design if the project advances, again, on 3/27 and going forward. If this project is to advance, there's 8 months of design development after town meeting, so there's lots of opportunities to continue molding this into what this community wants. We're pretty good with the design as it is aesthetically right now, but a lot of decisions will still get made within the building and on the site as we need to, particularly as we are mindful of the budget. Project milestones. I already mentioned this, and I'll just briefly go through it. And I'll mention that there's a way to read all this if you're that interested. 20 years of prior studies dating back to 2004 can be found on the Peterborough Projects.info site. You go down to the Archive, Fire, and Ambulance Project. All of these studies are right there. Take a look, see for yourself. This goes back to volunteers and staff members that no longer work for or are volunteering for the town. So this is a long-term commitment, and many iterations have mentioned this, which is what led us to May 2022, up through the development to May 2022 to ask the community for the money to start designing this in earnest. And I won't read all these ad nauseum, we'll focus on the ones that are important. There was a $2 million authorization for design and engineering of a new fire station, and that's what we've been working with as we've been going through this process. Many meetings with lots of folks in town, stakeholders, groups, trying to craft a project that made sense for this community, trying to understand what were the important goals to this community, both financially, programmatic for the fire department, aesthetically for the community, anything that we could get for input, so we started to put together a program that would make sense. Said it a lot, say it one more time. Actually, I'll say it 2 more times. I'm going to say it at town meeting if we make it that far too. We toured facilities all over New England, more than is listed here, to get ideas from other communities, their fire stations, how they went about their process, how they engaged with the public, what they would do if they had a chance to do it over again, and so on and so forth. Important for tonight because you're going to see the warrant article in a couple minutes. I guess 2 Augusts ago at this point, the Budget Committee and Select Board advised myself and those involved with the project to not exceed $12.1 million. It's $12,150,863. And shortly thereafter, as we started putting our goals together, we put a team together to put an RFQ and P selection. A committee was formed to put an RFQ and P for professional services out after advising the Select Board that construction management, given the tumultuous nature of the construction market and our prior experience with the first go-around on designing a fire station, we thought it made a lot of sense to make sure we had construction expertise at the table through the whole process, so we got them first. Not read all of this. Work began in earnest with the CM construction manager to help us figure out what we needed for an architect in June of '23. Some financial considerations with outside groups to determine whether or not there was any other avenue for a financial mechanism that could help support this project. Continued work through July and started doing interviews for prospective architectural firms. I always forget the number, but I believe it was 10 that submitted, and we interviewed 6. 7. I can't recall. Do you remember, Carl?
No.
A bunch. A lot of meetings in this room, and the building committee worked very diligently to make sure we tried to get a firm that met the characteristics of our community and could put our project on a little bit better footing than it had been prior. And I think we've done a pretty good job with that. I believe we're fairly pleased with SMP, regardless of the outcome of this project. The architect has done a very good job, in my opinion. And then the building committee was formalized and tasked by the Select Board to help oversee this project as it continued to evolve. Excuse me. They began formally meeting in August, and the architects began their work reconciling previous efforts and doing some preliminary design work based on budget assumptions and programmatic assumptions at that point. I will stop reading all this and keep skipping forward here. Continue to meet, continue to dive into the details on trying to hone a design, listening to the community, setting goals, and trying to develop a good, solid conceptual design. A little bit more recently, advanced into some more technical work. Geotechnical work began in Elm Street to, again, inform the soil types and foundation types that would be needed. In December, I skipped an important one because those pictures follow it. As I mentioned a moment ago, there was a number of public hearings in the 1832 room in September and October. There's a couple of pictures. They didn't have there before. They were very well attended. We got a lot of great feedback. Here's a picture of one of those sessions. I love this little laser. This is great. Oh, it already died. That's why you don't say it. This is the building committee meeting with the architect to go through the first iterations of a number of conceptual designs. Some members of the PDC that had joined us for that meeting. And this is the meeting with Resilient Buildings Group in this room with some members of the public and a lot of the folks that are interested in sustainability to start dive into some goals and figure out how could we craft this project within budget to meet the 2030 goals that were voted on a number of years ago at town meeting. Okay. December, SMP submitted their schematic documents for budget development. They went to our construction manager for rigorous cost estimating. And so Harvey Construction began that process in December. Did a number of presentations locally. Geophysical soil results came in. Harvey Construction delivered budget estimates, including information to help the building committee reduce costs to meet budgetary goal, meaning we were a little over budget when we started, but that's why we hired them in the first place. We knew we'd be trying to do a lot. If you recall, this was somewhere in that order of magnitude of $18 million on the first pass a couple years ago, and that was based on a programmatic study of what we do for work. We knew we were never going to be able to get that kind of money, and that the goals have been set, so we needed a construction manager to help us economize our design, work with our architect, and they did that. I'll get to, I'm jumping ahead, so which actually led to a couple of value engineering exercises with the building committee in this room, looking at options for any number of design components, dozens and dozens of design components, to try and cut costs to get it down to something that the building committee could ultimately recommend to advance, which they did. The drills were designed not necessarily to cook in a final design, but to say we have a pathway forward to hopefully town meeting, and they unanimously supported the project at that point. So recently, like I said, 2 value engineering exercises taking into consideration many comments from the public to inform design decisions, determine whether a pathway exists that meets the programmatic and budgetary goals of the project, and the building committee did make that determination that the project could move forward, meeting the goals, and particularly budgetary goals and programmatic goals. And I probably should have had in there also energy goals, which I'll talk about in a second. In January, Harvey Construction and SMP presented the current design and associated costs to construct the budget to the Budget Committee, Select Board, and the public in this room. And the next public forum, just because I'm going to remind you about 6 times, is on 3/27 at the library. While a pathway to meeting the budgetary goals for this project exists, the building committee and the team has a lot more work to do. So our goal leading up to this budget process was to deliver confidence that we could actually meet the financial and programmatic goals of the project. We don't expect any major aesthetic changes to the facility that you'll see again in a moment, but that's where we're at this point. Real design development would have to happen after town meeting, if it advances, if it's voted. All right, so what's next? Hey, there it is. I'm beating it to death. 3/27. Please come to the library. Please, anyone that's interested, please ask them to attend and come give their feedback on where we're at. Maybe we've missed something, maybe we need to reconsider, maybe you like it, maybe you don't like it. Come to that session and let us know. The session will provide the public another far more detailed look than tonight at the process, the current design, and the project's budget. The professional services team will be there, Harding will be there, the architect will be there, the civil engineers will be there. You'll have an opportunity to ask if you see things on the plan from right to the people who are designing it, pen to paper. Assuming the project continues to advance to town meeting, the building committee will continue to meet regularly with the project team for further project refinement. Welcome to come to building committee meetings, those are open to the public. The fire department, working with other town staff and professional service team, is currently working on the FF&E portion of the proposed budget, so the furniture and fixtures and equipment. This includes developing an inventory of items for reuse from the current station and obtaining quotes and estimates for other items that will need to be replaced or added. Members of the team will be present will be presenting at Rivermead on the 20th, actually. So that's coming up, and then of course, after following that 3/27 session, we would be on to town meeting if this continues to move forward. So,
Is there anything on the 27th, Seth?
hold on, oh yeah, as a matter of fact, we're meeting at the library,
Oh, okay.
6 p.m. Okay. We'll show the design in a second. We have an updated flyover. It's made a little bit of progress. I'll show that in a second. But let's talk about some of the goals that have been met. I have to give a lot of credit to the building committee. These are not my bullet points. I took these from this pamphlet right here. We have dozens and dozens of them. Maybe you have folks that are interested, can't attend a meeting, don't really want to go on the internet, check out the website or all the other ways we've been trying to reach people. Please grab a stack of these and hand them out. This has all these bullet points in it, and I think they're important ones. So we've reduced the building size by approximately 30%, largely because we got wise to the fact that we could reuse this motor pool building, which shrinks down this building and helps us to meet our budgetary goal. So everybody remembers the project total that we were talking about a couple years ago. We're about half of that at this point. Does a lot of other things though. Proper ventilation, which we don't have currently. Isolated contamination, which we don't have currently. All emergency vehicles can fit within the apparatus bay. We don't have that currently. Fitness room for town's first responders. You got a fitness room there? We don't have that currently.
Exercises and frustration.
But we want our emergency responders to be fit, that's for sure. Right? Adequately sized administrative offices. I'll leave that one alone. I already mentioned the motor pool building. There's a rainwater capture system built into this design so that we don't have to tap into the potable water system. We can wash trucks and maybe even fight some fires with it if we've got enough. And it also meets compliance with Peterborough's 2030 energy goals, including the integration of a water source heat pump HVAC system, provisions for addition and expansions of roof-mounted solar array, and future addition of EV chargers.
Gotcha.
Site goals met with the current proposal. It's located on land we already own, helps us to keep our costs down. And it meets the response time at that location for all areas serviced by Peterborough Fire and Rescue. There has no direct wetland impact, and I'll show you the new flyover which delineates the wetland in a moment. It has engineered stormwater retention areas to improve existing stormwater flow. There is no engineered stormwater management on that site presently. It does provide pedestrian access to Shaw's and CVS via the new sidewalk that would connect from Elm Street past the PCC. It allows for safe separation of DPW and emergency vehicles from community center parking lot. We all know what voting days are like over there, particularly on snowstorms. So, and that is done by creating a new roadway over here, which separates off all the parking and traffic, making a safer site for our patrons of the community center and voters. All parking spaces are now will be delineated. It's a big dirt lot right now. It would be nice to be able to park. I'm sure the chief will appreciate that. We've all seen chief and staff out there managing traffic on a voting day. And there's separate parking on the new access road for PFR staff responding to emergencies, which is over here, which allows them to respond quicker and get into the apparatus bay and hopefully save some lives in the process. And there will be some landscaping to help beautify that parcel. It needs a little love, in my opinion. Additional project benefits. It's going to provide some space for the town's IT network operations center and a safe dry storage for required storage of vital records. I would encourage you to come take a look at the basement of this building at some point if you think we don't need this. And, anytime you'd like to come in, I'll show you what the basement looks like. We do need better storage for these things, which also includes a lot of the network infrastructure, which is also down in a flood-prone basement. Improved access to the display of historical artifacts and equipment related to Peterborough's emergency services as well. Okay, so how to participate if you've missed the previous visioning sessions or can't make the next one. PeterboroughProjects.info or the town's website can link you back. I learned when I got back from vacation on Monday that the link was broken over the weekend. Apologies if anyone had a hard time with that. It's working again. You can go view any of the videos from the last sessions, building committee meeting minutes, all the studies I previously mentioned, the plans, anything you need. And if it's not there, you can email me and I'll send it to you. Other ways to learn. Upcoming public events attended by a building committee member. Rivermead is the next one on the docket. Attend a building committee meeting. They're posted publicly. They happen in this room typically. Attend the next public input session in March 27th at 6 p.m.
That's what I heard.
I've got a conflict there. Is there any way to rearrange that?
Sure. Can you edit the PowerPoint on the attend town meeting in May if you can't make others. Assuming this continues to advance, we will get into a much higher level of detail at town meeting this coming year. You can meet with me one-on-one. My phone number is right there. My email address is right there. You can stop in the building. That's why I put a beautiful picture of the building up. You can stop in the fire department and talk to the chief or his staff. That's why I put their beautiful, not quite a very beautiful. You can reach out to a building committee member. I listed all of them. You probably know half of them. I would happily put you in touch, and I'm sure any of them would talk to you about this. And stop in at the Peterborough Townhouse or PFR, as I mentioned. So here's the existing site. We're all pretty familiar with it. This is the proposed location. Next to the PCC, there's the motor pool, which we'll reuse for the facility if this advances. Here's the highway garage, the pharmacy, and the grocery store. Let's look at the updated flyover. I think I need a little help with this part. The blue is the newly delineated wetland area. That's actual wetland. You see that little buffer next to it. Some potential wetland buffer impact. We have now fixed the PCC access way and tried to provide a little bit more detailed design than the last one that was out. This is also available on the Peterborough Projects page. This is the access way and the emergency parking.
Is the motor pool building in use right now?
It's cold storage right now for public works primarily. There's other seasonal items, picnic tables, things like that.
Are monies going to be spent to refresh that at all, or is it good as is?
If there's some money available, maybe we'll paint the garage door, but this building's actually structurally in pretty good shape. It would be very, very expensive to make any substantial modifications because it would have to come up to code at that point. That's our pellet silo. Behind that other little thing is the HVAC system and chiller.
That circular drive that goes around the community center, out in front of the community center, does that spill out into the parking lot, or does that come fully around to, back to Elm?
Goes in the parking lot.
Goes in the parking lot?
I can go back to this site.
No, that's okay.
No, I haven't.
think
I have a
saw
site
it.
plan on here. I don't. You can't quite see it. Yeah, and you can see it in this one.
I see it.
This here,
Yeah.
yeah. And then some bump outs there to provide a little bit of protection for pedestrians and motorists.
And that's two-way traffic on that side?
To be determined, but I think the prevailing logic was one way at this point. To try to keep things a little safer, coming in from Elm Street this direction and exiting out that way.
Oh, I meant, yeah, so the parking area is two-way.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the intent is to try and keep this access road sort of gated here for six-wheeler and emergency use. It, in theory, could be used otherwise, but that's the intent. There should be hopefully enough room. Basic designers have told us to move vehicles around the top of that lot.
Seth, if we were to include the police department, is that being thought about? I think it's being thought about, but
I'm
what
not
is the thought?
thinking about it. I mean, the community spoke fairly resoundingly that wasn't of interest at the time. So the charge that the building committee has been tasked with is a fire and rescue facility. Now, in theory, yeah, you've got some room. In theory, I hate to even talk about this because it got some people pretty charged up, but I mean, that could be demolished. You could build there. You don't have a lot of room otherwise. It's all wetland, as that flyover indicated with the blue. So it'd be a little bit tight. But the charge isn't currently a multi-use facility. It's a fire and rescue.
Mary?
There are a couple questions. One, in additional benefits, would the meeting room, the large meeting room space, be available to other departments or the general public?
Yeah, it will. It'll be available as a community room similar to the rooms at the library and, or any other room.
You might want to add that to your additional benefits.
It might have been in there. I think it was in there. Because right when you said that, I said, I'm pretty sure that was in there. And I missed it.
And the other question was, and I know when we looked at other town fire stations, having on-site configuration for EMS staff training was important, and I believe that's still there in the stairwell component.
Right. That little, what's the cupola?
Yeah, there are quite a few dual-use areas in the building for both fire training and medical training.
Other questions before I jump in? Go ahead, Leslie.
I just want to observe that I feel like at the beginning of the most recent process, there was a lot of talk about the health and safety of the fire and rescue folks in that building. You did touch on it here, but I just sort of wanted to go back and remind everybody that we're not doing it because we've been trying since 1972. We're really doing it because not only does not all the equipment fit, but our firefighters and rescue personnel aren't really safe in that building.
Yeah.
So.
Absolutely right. Completely inadequate facility, health, safety, and space. Thank you.
Seth, a couple of things quick, and if it's more appropriate, March 27th, that's fine too. You mentioned you're going to need, if the bond does pass, another 8 months of design work. Now, you guys done a great job so far with all this design work. What would be entailed, like, should we get the bond passed as far as extra design? Can you kind of summarize that?
Well, this is just conceptual, so now they really get into the CAD work and designing a facility that a contractor can actually construct. You can't construct off this level of design. So
and
this
8 months is reasonable.
Conceptual gets you where your budget. Yeah, I think so. It could be less. I mean.
And then what about actual construction? What's the estimate once you have all that design work done?
Hard to say for sure, but I think we're, if we're 18 months out, then we're 22, depending on where winter falls away, and the better part of 18 months to construct. hard to know until you
No,
start
understood.
constructing.
Just curious. That's what I was thinking.
Take it from me,
Big
the
picture
Main
is-
Street Bridge took a little longer than we thought it would. You know, these things do get a little tight and they take a
Yeah,
little,
but-
you run into problems sometimes. So.
Which bridge?
He had to bring up bridges.
Pick your bridge.
So that's 2026?
Let's see.
And
Meeting.
24 months would be spring, summer of '26.
Yeah, I think that's about right.
Go ahead, Al.
What part of the 2 million that was set aside for design has been used, or am I incorrect in my assumption?
Sure. Do you want to, that's a great segue to Nicole.
Yeah,
I
great.
have that information, but she's about to get into that. Any other questions on this before we go to that? Because that's right where we're going.
I guess we're
Now we
ready
just
go.
want to talk about money. All right. Let's talk about money.
Thanks, Al.
Thank you.
Okay, so here is the summary. It's just a summary page showing the bond itself. We have our estimated project cost of $12,150,863. This is the remaining fund balance of $480,000, remaining balance of that warrant article that you were just alluding to, $480,670. Done a great job keeping this well within budget, and it's great to be able to take some of these funds and apply them to the actual construction, design and construction. And we have some fund balance available to reduce the bond. Why am I bringing this up now? Because if the select board and budget committee choose to recommend a bond that uses fund balance to reduce the total bonding cost and thus reduce interest, I need to be able to write that into the warrant article. And so I actually have a revised warrant article that we'll be looking at. It's a bit different from what you've already seen, that takes into account using fund balance if you choose to do so. We also have two types of bonding scenarios that we can look at. This is not something that we're going to commit to tonight because we don't actually know what the bonding scenarios will be when we go to take the bond. But we've got some estimates, and these are pretty conservative, but still pretty good estimates as far as the interest rates we'll be looking at potentially this summer. We have a 20-year term at 3.5%, and we have a 30-year term at 4%. And so using an extremely complicated calculator to calculate all of this, that we're not going to go into because it is tiny, tiny font, even when it's just on my regular monitor. I've extrapolated, I've taken that summary of that information and put it up here so it's a little bit easier for everyone to see and read. So if we take the total project cost, the remaining balance after you've subtract out, what's left, minus the remaining balance, and we can put in some fund balance numbers just to see what happens. So let's just start with 100,000 to see what that does. You can see that the total amount to bond drops down by 100,000, and that means that your principal amounts drop down, your interest goes down a little bit, the total cost of the bonding is there. And then here's an estimate of what the first full year payment will be. Keep in mind that the warrant article has a partial year payment. Every time you take a bond out, they ask for the partial year first, so it's just the interest only. That's what you see in the warrant article, is a not to exceed amount for that partial year payment, but the first full year would be the following year, and that's what you'll see there. That's what the impact on the tax rate would be. And then if we were to estimate, well, what does that mean if on my house, on my tax bill, this is what the estimated first year tax impact on per $100,000 of assessed valuation would be. So you can do a little bit of math yourself and figure out what that would mean for your house. And so I did that in two different boxes at the two different fundings. So the 30-year term at 4% or the 20-year term at 3.5%.
And would that impact for the first year, would that also apply to subsequent years, or?
So we tend to use a level principal structure to our debt, so that means that we're paying the same principal amount every year, which means that you're paying a little bit less interest every year. So that's the highest payment that we'll ever see, is that first full year, and then it's going to drop every year after that. You can see that here if you look real close at these payment calculators. You can see that, as it goes down, the total payment amounts drop year over year.
And you're advocating that the 1.1 mil of the fund balance
That is,
available?
that is the total amount that we have available. So we have about $2.1 million available. We believe that we should have about $1 million available for cash flow purposes.
Okay,
So there's,
that's why the 100K would be.
exactly, so that leaves us with about $1.1 million that we could use to, right off the bat to reduce the amount that we're borrowing.
I know you don't have it here, but it would be great to see this overlaid with our existing debt over time.
Actually do have it. This is where those really tiny numbers come in. So if you want to see that, you can see this is our existing debt over time. And then here's, actually, this is probably the more familiar, what you're more familiar with. This is straight out of the CIP. So I took all those numbers, I fed them into this calculator. So there's the principal payments, there's the interest payments, there's the total debt payments per year. And then you can see again how that declines, assuming that we take on no additional debt. This is using the scenario 1 of the funding scenario, so that's 3.5% over 20 years.
Guys, look, if we don't borrow any other money, we'll be down under 100,000 by 2047.
Be here before you know.
Okay, so that is there, and for anyone who wants to look at that excruciating detail, I'm happy to go through it with you.
So you typed in 100,000.
I had at first, yeah,
right,
but just threw in
But
100.
there's 1.1 million available.
There is, yeah.
So what does that do?
You want to just wipe out the whole thing?
There's an
No,
adverse-
so 1.1 is, no, I know, but still, that means we have no cushion for anything.
No, that's leaving the.
Still do it.
So we also have an estimate, we do have a fund balance estimate for this year. We believe that we'll be returning approximately $600,000 to fund
Leslie,
balance.
she's answering your question.
Sorry, yeah. We expect to be returning approximately $600,000 to fund balance at the end of this year, based on our current estimates. Most of that is higher than anticipated revenues, but there's also a fair amount of, I'm just going to knock on wood here real quick, but reduced overtime, for instance, because we haven't had a particularly difficult winter, and other, other expense lines that are a little bit low. And $600,000 is in line with historically what we've averaged in a normal year.
Which would bring up to 2.7.
Correct, that'll bring us back up again, yes.
Will this be shown, or part of it shown at town meeting?
I could discuss it, but based on how you vote tonight, we're going to fix the amount of fund balance that's going to go to town meeting.
Isn't that a decision for the select board?
It's going to be a decision for both of you, because both of you are going to need to vote to recommend, both bodies will need to vote to recommend a warrant
But
article.
eventually, the select board
Written
has to
with.
make that decision, correct?
No, this is a decision where you, the selectmen and the budget committee are making tonight.
You trying to put it on?
Yeah.
No, I thought we were strictly advisory.
Well, remember, you have to take votes to recommend or not recommend warrant
I understand
articles, and
that.
this language is going to be written into that warrant article.
And I was just curious, Lily, can you speak to those, the 20-year, 30-year scenarios? Do you have any strong feelings one way or the other?
I have very strong feelings, if you'd like to hear them.
No. It's actually why I asked.
It's, the interest, if you don't use any fund balance, the amount of interest you would save by going to a 20-year versus a 30-year is $3 million. To be exact, $3,005,000. And if you did use fund balance, the amount of savings doing a 20-year versus a 30-year in interest payments that you wouldn't have to make, because you have 10 years less being paid at a lower interest rate, is $2,730,000.
And how much
It's
fund balance would apply in that scenario?
My recommendation is $1.1 million in fund balance, because we add to fund balance every year at the end of the year for what we have budgeted for but then don't spend. This past year, we put $1.7 million to fund balance. My projections right now are at $600,000 to be added here, tracking at 10% underspending at this stage, which is significant considering that we have paid all of the large items, which is all of our bond payments are made, all of our capital reserve payments are made. I don't think that we'll be adding much to fund balance from revenues because those are updated in the fall when we set tax rate. But the amount of money that you could save in future payments by using $1.1 million is an additional, if you went with the 20-year choice, you would save an additional $412,500 in interest payments over 20 years. So
That's
using,
by spending $1.1 million today.
if you use $1.1 million today, you actually save $1.5 million. It's significant. So you can never, when we use tax fund balance to reduce tax rate, that is, you use exactly that amount of money. It never is more money than that, but this is a very unique way to save a significant dollar figure for taxpayers for the next 20 years. If you went with the 30-year, the savings by using the $1.1 million in fund balance is $687,500 additional savings in interest that you wouldn't have to pay over 30 years. So
that I understand clearly, you're recommending we use $1.1 million of fund balance. We apply that to a 20-year fixed one.
that's what I would do if this was me spending my money. That's what I would do.
Great minds think alike.
I mean, I'm very conservative when it comes to spending. So that's what I would recommend. You have the fund balance. We will have more fund balance added to the $1 million that we're setting aside and not using today for you to be able to have fund balance used to affect tax rate in the fall. And it protects you. The $1 million gives you that cushion of if there is an emergency, you still have $1 million in fund balance to use for that emergency. It's kind of the best of all your worlds, where you're not using all your fund balance, you're still saving some, and a $1 million emergency is a pretty big, that's a pretty big amount of money.
Yeah, we've never seen anything like that before.
I hope we never do that.
Yeah, well, hope in one hand.
That was
It was
a
significant.
horrible, horrible mistake.
And I certainly don't want to belabor that any more than we have to, but, I will say, even at that time, when we were facing that particular emergency, Lily did talk to the bank and ask, what can we do? What are available options for tax anticipation notes, and what would that cost us? And if my memory serves, we could have borrowed $1 million, no problem, and it would have cost us less than $1,000 in interest.
I think it's less than $800 in interest
It was-
for a tax anticipation note because they're paid back in less than a year.
Exactly. So it was a very small amount. So if we were to run into a true emergency that somehow depleted every penny in our fund balance, the cost to borrow is incredibly low.
You would still have to, over that following year, pay back an extra $1 million if you borrowed it. So it's not like just
Yes.
magic money that shows up.
You always have to pay back what you borrow. And if we were to run into that kind of an emergency where there was no other funding available, nothing from the state, nothing from the federal government, no FEMA money.
Or think about all our capital reserve monies,
Right.
that we have monies already saved
Set
set aside
yeah.
for road emergencies that might occur that you could tap into.
With votes,
for-
votes to
with-
reappropriate,
yeah, mhm.
there are other options that you could pull, that you could do at town meeting, but you need the money to get you through to town meeting to be able to explore those options. So. yep.
Nicole, could you
Go ahead, Al.
Could you show the result on tax rate
Yep, so,
using the 1.1 million?
absolutely. So actually what you're looking at right now is using the 1.1 million, and let me just pull this down just a little bit so I can
Oh, it is. Oh, okay.
see the button a little bit better. There it is. All right, so here's what it is without the 1.1 million.
Yeah.
So So the estimated tax rate, I'm assuming we're not even looking at the 30-year term at this
No.
point? All right. So the estimated tax rate on the 20-year term would be $1.16. And then with the 1.1 million, be $1.05.
You would save 11 cents a year for 20 years, not just the first year. Every year it would be
Per
11 cents
thousand.
less.
And it would drop.
Yes, yes.
And it would
Thank
drop
you,
down.
yes. I mean, the savings is, it's every year for the full term.
And if we look at the opposite of what Bill's correctly concerned about, what if we had some extra fund balance in future years? Can we prepay these loans, or we're locked in?
You're
No,
locked in.
this is it.
But you can refinance if it ever drops, no?
You can
Well, the bond
refinance
bank,
after 10 years, and
Yeah.
only if that interest rate in that 10-year period is less, significantly less. I think it has to be more than 1.5% less than what you're borrowing.
Yeah.
This is a 3.5% interest rate. It's incredibly low. So if 10 years from now, we saw a 2% interest rate offer, the bond bank would actually contact us and let us know that that exists.
which they have done.
Which they have done. They
They're
did
very good
that
about
when I first started 2.5 years ago, and that's when we did refinancing significantly.
And we're pretty, sorry, 1 second, Mandy. We're pretty committed, or not committed, we're pretty confident that 3.5% in June would
Yes.
be. how
These numbers are
confident
coming from the bond bank. I'm not
Yeah.
No, I
Googling
understand that, but
interest
that's
rates.
today, right? But, I mean,
Nope,
obviously-
that is what
They're
they are.
committed to that?
They are being conservative, and it might even be less than that. But this is they can't guarantee it.
Obviously.
But this is they're
Very realistic.
very realistic figures.
Don't they set rates biannual?
They did. They had a bond sale in January, and they're 30 years with 3.5%.
Mandy?
Actually, Mary had a question first.
One second, all right.
I just wanted to revisit the fund balance question. Can you remind us again what the minimum amount that we must keep in that fund balance?
Changes every year.
But-
It's a percentage.
Right,
So
but
the
give or
minimum
take.
amount is 3% of the total amount that the town has to raise. But that doesn't just include us, it includes a formula from the school district and from the county. And I don't even want to look at that crystal ball because it's just so murky. There's too many things that go into that calculation.
What covers us with fund balance in terms of protection for cash flow and emergencies is that for cash flow, we always, right now, we have about $660,000 in unpaid taxes. And that's this year's tax bill and the previous 4 years. So people that are in lien all the way through the tax bills that went out in November. We have $660,000 owed. I'm recommending that you maintain $1 million to not only cover that $660,000, which really isn't needed. The cash on hand that we have is significant. We don't need this for cash flow. It's really recommended for emergencies, as Bill mentioned, that do occur. I mean, your road alone was an emergency 2.5 years ago.
It's all of our roads. There's no
Most
gate-
importantly,
there's no
you're at the
gate
top of it,
bottom.
though.
I walked it just the other day.
Mandy, did you get this?
Yeah, and I just, so a lot, I mean, this all makes sense to me, and I mean, thank you, Nicole and Lily, for all the work that you guys have done on this, and it makes sense to me. It seemed to be logical to me using the $1.1 million in fund balance, but I admit that this is not what I do full-time. This is something that I'm learning every year. This is my 8th year on Budget Committee, but I'm still learning. So I actually reached out to some friends of mine around the state, other towns, other town administrators, other finance directors, other, very experienced Budget Committee members, and kind of presented the scenario, and not a single hesitation. Every single one of them said, absolutely, this is what you need to do. So that made me feel a little bit better. That gave me a lot more confidence, I should say. Not that I don't have confidence, but I like to be doubly sure that I'm looking at all perspectives. And so it was nice for me to hear that it was like, no, that's a no-brainer. That's absolutely what you would want to do, is to use that amount given what you have left. So.
Al?
Is the Budget Committee's approval conditional upon the construction, the actual estimate by a construction company? In other words, could we change our mind at that point, and say, well, wait a minute, the costs are going up all the time, so we don't have a firm estimate from a construction company, but we committed to go ahead of that, regardless of the cost.
Your recommendation is required for the warrant to be posted. I have to be able to put a recommendation on the warrant, and that recommendation will stay there until May town meeting. If you were to want to revise your recommendation on the floor of May town meeting, you could do that.
I think, Alice, are
I'm
you
getting
asking
you
what happened?
beyond
Yeah.
that.
Right,
Go ahead.
exactly.
No, because this is our
Seth, please.
authorization. Okay.
Seth, because you can answer the,
We do have a firm estimate. We have a not to exceed 12.1 million, 12.1 and some change number at this point. So our construction manager, that's why, one of the reasons we went with construction management, they have to lock in that price. That's the value, one of the values to working with construction management. So when we go to town meeting, they will honor that price and then provide a guaranteed maximum price after that time, which would not exceed our limit.
Which is,
Without full blueprints, it sounded like we couldn't make that claim, other than this is for the bond.
They have the construction expertise to come to us and say, we can do this project for this amount or less. 12.1 was the target from day one, and they are prepared to move forward with us if it advances at town meeting at that price or less. They will issue a guaranteed maximum price, which means any risk of the project going north of that dollar figure is their liability, not the town's.
And my understanding is that they aren't actually going to do the construction itself.
No, it's all subbed out. They're not an in-house, they're a management company. That's right. So they carry the risk if the prices increase, not the
So
town.
if it becomes a $13 million, they're up on up to
That's on there.
900,000 essentially.
their problem.
Right.
Or will they try to
confident
cut
that
back
they-
the scope of the work? Can they not cut back the scope of the work?
They can't cut back the scope of the work without agreeance, but we will have a project. We already have a strong estimated project at that value or less. So
They've agreed to.
they have agreed to. Thank you.
Other comments, questions? Concerns?
Yeah, I have one, and everybody knows what I'm gonna say, we're ready. I have a really big concern about using the full 1.1 and saying a really big concern doesn't even scratch the surface of it, but I shouldn't swear. So, it's, this past fall, we used $1.4 million to buy down our tax rate, so there was only a modest increase to it. If we don't have, and I know that maybe we're gonna have $600,000 more by the end of the fiscal year, but in the fall, not only would we be eating that $1.4 million that we use this year as an increase, but all the additional, any increase, the 3 point whatever for the town and the 4 point whatever for the school, those increases would be compounded. If we don't have that, if we don't have a bunch of money to offset the tax rate increases, then there's gonna be a really big increase that's gonna hurt the most vulnerable of our population. Renters, people that are on fixed incomes, people that are, you know, just barely scraping by right now. There's gonna be a big increase.
Not to renters, but. to the
Well,
landlord.
renters,
They don't get passed down.
renters rent houses that
They get passed down
pay
by the
taxes.
landlord, right?
The $1.4 million was needed to offset what was close to a 21% increase in the amount of property tax revenue the town needed to raise for last year's budget. This year's budget increase is substantially smaller. So just because $1.4 million transfer was necessary this past fall, doesn't necessarily mean it's necessary this coming fall. Additionally, it'll be offset by increased assessed value from all the development that's going on. I firmly believe that if folks in this room are going to take a vote on a financial engagement today, we should bear the cost. To do anything else is to simply put the cost of this facility on the taxpayers that are up and coming. I don't think that's fair.
What do you mean by bear the cost?
Well, I mean, if we aren't willing to take a hit on our property taxes to fund this development, why should we put it on the next generation of citizens?
So you're arguing positive?
Well, yeah, we should, at least
Okay.
this
I just want to
budget, this
understand
fund
what you're
transfer.
thinking. Okay, thank you. Other comments?
I don't know if it's of any use to anybody, but at this point, I just put up on the screen, this shows the history of the fund balance, how much we've added to the fund balance over the last number of years, how much we've raised and appropriated through taxation, the amount of fund balance that the selectmen used to reduce the tax rate, the assessed evaluation after tips were removed each of those years, and then the resulting tax rate for each of those years. So you can see back through the history of all that. And then if you really want to get in the weeds, there's the fund balance calculation over on the left.
Al?
Based upon what Bill said, it's very hard to make a decision. Based upon, she strongly feels that the not using this fund balance is important. Lily says it is. How strongly does the select board feel about taking that stand? And should we follow that?
I'm not saying zero.
No, we understand.
I'm
Tyler?
in for 1.1, for sure. I'm looking long-term, and, I think
Can we hear
Mark's
one too?
probably- No, I think it's important. I think it was, I mean, that's how you plan for your future debt. You know, you pay it down as fast as you can early on.
Well, we've been kicking that can down the road for so long.
Of course.
Will he go on record, though, as not opposing or wanting a
We're
modification?
gonna find out. We're gonna have a vote
No.
eventually.
I don't want to vote.
I'm not gonna vote against it because we're doing something that in my opinion is foolish.
Well, foolish is a strong word.
But
That's
I
the strongest.
think, I
Why
think,
not?
I think that, well, the thing, you can,
He's got stronger words available.
yeah.
Hey, well,
I mean,
No, I think-
spending down our fund balance all the way, I don't think is a smart idea.
It's not all the way. It's nowhere near all the way. In fact, yeah.
Well,
Said it was
We'd be back up to
1.7.
1.7 once the 600-ish goes back in, so.
With that transfer, what is our estimated delta between where we would be at and what the state mandatory minimums are?
Again.
There is no state
Yeah,
mandatory.
there's
It is a
nothing mandatory.
recommended.
Yeah.
You can have $0 in fund balance, and many towns do.
Yeah.
I wouldn't recommend
That's
zero. That would be,
If we're gonna vote for what is apparently the most expensive firehouse in the history of the state, we should be willing to pay for it and not force future generations to pay for this decision.
Leslie, did you have a comment or a question?
Yeah, I would just say that I think, Andrew's putting things in context of what actually happened last year is a good reminder. But I also agree that it's a little nervous-making when we don't know what the assessed value is going to be on this new assessment or the new valuation that's coming down the pike. And, I think we all feel the pinch, so I think it's worth seriously considering. I don't think we should wait for other people's vote before we make a vote on what we want. But it's a big deal to potentially take away that safety net that we rely on every single year to fix the tax rate is a major consideration also for our taxpayers, paying in the short term, so I don't think I was so happy to write the checks I wrote this past year. So, I just think it's worth considering both sides.
I think it's worth calling out that if you're not comfortable spending the money, we shouldn't vote for the bond.
No, I agree.
And
I
if
agree.
you are comfortable spending the money, then we should be spending the money. I don't understand the justice of putting this on future generations.
And it's a lot.
it's not putting the whole thing on future generations. You're talking about over the life of the loan, we spend $1.1 million right now in order to save an additional $430,000 over 20 years. $430,000 over 20 years doesn't justify, in my mind, getting rid of 1.1 million today.
I'm opposed for
$400,000.
I think your point's well taken, Bill. Are we gonna still look at some other warrant articles, correct? And then at the end, are we gonna look at the final, because this is strictly the
Yes.
effect of the firehouse on our tax rate, correct?
Yes, and so here's the whole thing, if you want to take a look at what the fund balance would do right now, let me put it I don't want to do this. Actually, the first year raise and appropriate doesn't change anything. So the bond itself actually has, what the amount that you put to the bond today will have no impact on the first year's raise to appropriate number. Because again, that's just the interest, and that's the maximum amount of interest that we'd be looking to pay next year. It would be in future years, but here's next year's.
In the whole,
Yes.
I'm seeing something, your revenue, the 48670.
Yeah, I know, I didn't change that. That hasn't been updated since we had the conversation 2
Okay,
hours
I
ago.
just, because now it's calculated to a much lower number.
Yeah, no, I haven't
Okay,
updated
good.
that since.
Okay.
So it doesn't really matter because the only thing that's going into the calculation is the 305.
Okay.
Because that's the amount to raise and
Sure.
appropriate. So here's our current assessed valuation after TIF districts are removed. So if you have no fund balance used to reduce the tax rate and there's no increase to assessed valuation, then this is the pre-use of fund balance tax rate from this past fall. So this is before the selectmen used the $1.4 million to reduce the tax rate. Here's what our new estimated tax rate would be, and that's an increase of $2.38. With no use of fund balance and a 10% increase in assessed valuation, which we are expecting. We're actually expecting closer to 15% because our assessed valuation compared to market value is incredibly low right now. It's below 75%. We would expect an estimated tax rate of 11.99, which would be a $1.18 difference. If the selectmen were to use, let's just say 500,000 of the 600,000 in assessed valuation or fund balance, then you would see, and then 10% assessed valuation, you would see that drop a bit. And then again, with fund balance and a 15% increase in assessed valuation, it'll be up 15 cents. That's based on what was the previous, what would have been the tax rate if it was fully loaded, but let's look at $9.17. And you can see it's up $1.79 with $500,000 of fund balance, which is very conservative.
Without fund balance, it's a $4 per thousand increase.
Without fund balance and without an increase to assessed valuation, but we know that we're going to have an increase to assessed valuation because we are going through a reval this fall.
Yeah.
And we know it's going to be at least 10%. I can't imagine it being less than that. It will probably be closer to 15.
I'm sorry, I'm a little confused. What am I currently paying per thousand on the latest tax bill?
$9.17.
$9.17. Town portion of the tax bill. Not looking at the county, not looking at the school district, just focused on on what we actually have control over.
So this is like best case scenario, 20% increase?
A best case scenario? No. Best case scenario is, putting even more fund balance towards it.
Can we enter the 1.1?
We already spent it.
Okay, so more than a 10% increase then, right?
It's an increase, there's no question.
What's the best
Absolutely.
case scenario?
It has an impact.
And as I understand it, with the two funding scenarios, $1, somewhere between $1 and about $1.16 is tied to this project.
Yes.
So this project is actually going to fully account, almost fully account for the whole property tax increase.
Because the fund balance is covering the rest of it. I think.
More or less, yeah. I don't know what just happened there.
And just so I want to be clear, this bond passing will raise property taxes by about 10%.
Possibly.
Okay.
Just on the town portion, not the entire property tax bill, just the town's 36% portion of the property tax bill, yes. So it's not going to take your what's the total tax rate?
$28.19.
$28.19 and increase that by 10%.
It's all fun and games, so you got to pay for it.
And we'll be doing that pretty soon. If this passes.
All right, so I'll let you all ruminate on that a bit while we go back to PowerPoint.
Excuse me, do we know how much the other portion of the taxes are likely to be going up?
No idea. It's real, I mean, there's so many variables, I have no idea.
Right, I don't expect it would be known here in the town because you don't really control that, but the amount that we go up is going to be smaller than the amount the other part goes up.
Well, comparing the 2023 tax rate to the 2022, the school portion increased 11%, the state portion increased 37%, and the county portion increased 24%, and there was no increase to the municipal portion. So,
And that's why we used $1.4 million of
Yeah.
our fund balance last year to offset those school, the other high increases.
yeah, so the town was essentially level funded.
And in recent years, there were years where we didn't use any fund balance.
Yes.
Just to offset the
Well,
tax
yeah.
rate.
In recent memory, just the 1 year, and that was that special year that we were just talking about. We don't need to talk about it again. And then the following year, we returned less than the usual amount to fund balance, but that was because we were catching up on the deferred expenses, maintenance, purchases from that prior year that we're not going to talk about anymore.
Let's talk about the other articles if we could.
Yep, absolutely. So, back to Article 3, the budget for fiscal year 2025, the gross appropriation of $17,589,895. That is the total gross amount to raise and appropriate for the general budget, municipal budget, water and wastewater operations. Does not include any revenues whatsoever. Would you like to take votes now, or would you like to wait until after we've reviewed them all and then come back through them?
I think we should review, go through them all, was my feeling.
And then go back through them all again?
No, and then go back and vote. Okay, and unless people feel strongly, we can vote right now, that's fine with me.
Can't we just
I
vote?
think we should get it over.
People ready to vote on these one by one? Okay, great.
We have already discussed all this.
That's fine. Stand corrected. Let's take a vote.
Select board votes.
Aye. Yep.
How about the budget committee? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That's 8-1. That's your, Don, that gets yours, A. Carl, you were an A.
All right, Article 4, this varies a little bit from what you were sent out earlier. This is, instead of 83,000, we're at 120,000. This is what we are expecting to raise and appropriate following a public hearing to increase the cost of the blue bags, which we're going to be holding at the next selectmen's meeting. So, and this is the cost of the full operation of the pay-as-you-throw program.
So we're basically looking at a 50% increase because of the...
Actually, it's a
expenses?
reduction. Last year it was 140,000, so it's going down to 120. It said 83 before because that was how much, without adjusting the cost of the bags, that's how much we would have had available. But we need to adjust the cost of the bags. It'll be the first time in, it must be 25 years since the start of the program, that the cost of the bags have ever been adjusted.
If there is blowback or resistance to that, such that people don't buy bags,
Yep.
are we prepared to take that come out of the general fund?
Yes, it would. It would come out of other portions of the recycling center's budget.
Report our expenses for that program.
The expenses, yeah, exactly, so the
If you
hauling
don't- If you
fees.
don't have a bag, you can't throw.
Now, it may not be a one-to-one,
Right.
because hauling fees are what hauling fees are, but yes, it would have to come
Expended
out.
is based on weight, so.
Yes.
And the select board votes.
To recommend.
Yep.
Budget committee? Aye. Opposed? So it's unanimous for budget committee?
Now we're going into the capital reserve and expendable trust fund articles. Article 5, the police department fleet management capital reserve fund for $125,000.
Select board, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. 0 opposed.
Budget committee?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Unanimous?
Article 6, fire department apparatus and equipment capital reserve fund, $210,000.
Select board.
Aye.
Budget committee? Aye. Any opposed? One opposed? 8 to 1.
Do we have a projection for the future on the money that will be needed, the reserve increase?
It's in, yep, it's in your CIP slides, so, and that spreadsheet, we sent you the updated one on Friday, so it's all in there. Public Works Fleet Management Capital Reserve Fund, $500,000.
Select Board, what say you?
Yes.
Budget Committee? Any opposed? It's unanimous.
Roadway Systems Upgrade Capital Reserve Fund, the total amount to raise and appropriate will be $400,000, but $53,434 of that will come out of the proceeds of a special one-time highway payment in accordance with House Bill 2, and $346,566 will be raised through taxation.
Do we need an explanation of what this program is?
Oh, give me the clicker. Let's go.
We've already heard all
He's got it. You don't want to say it.
God, say yes before he starts.
Budget Committee?
Explain the fire first.
Any opposed?
Your story before.
It's unanimous.
Article 9, Recreation Department Equipment Capital Reserve Fund, $15,000.
Yes.
And the Budget Committee, aye?
Yep.
Unanimous.
Adams Pool Improvement Capital Reserve Fund, $20,000.
Aye.
Aye.
Budget Committee?
Aye.
Any opposed? It's unanimous.
GIS Capital Reserve Fund, $18,500.
Select Board.
Yep.
Budget Committee? Aye. One opposed?
Okay.
8 to 1.
Bridges, Culverts, and Dams Capital Reserve Fund to raise and appropriate $500,000, offset partially $65,790 to come from the proceeds of another special one-time bridge payment in accordance with House Bill 2, leaving $434,210 to be raised through taxation.
Yep.
Approves. Budget Committee? Any opposed? That's unanimous.
Article 13, now this is where we get into the TIF districts. So this will establish the West Peterborough TIF District Expendable Trust Fund, and we'll move the money that's currently in the TIF district escrow account into that expendable trust fund. There are 3 of these, one for each of the TIF districts. What this does, and you just saw it when we were reviewing, back an hour and a half ago now, when we were reviewing the department budgets, you saw a spike in the net budget, or the net cost of the Public Works budget. That wasn't due to an increase in the actual expenditures of the Public Works Department. It was due to a loss of revenue from the TIF district because the project that had been in there in the previous year had been taken out. We don't manage our capital projects or capital purchases this way. Typically, when we do these projects, they're outside of the operating budget. They're in a special warrant article, like the fire station is, for instance. In this case, we've always had to run the TIF district projects through the operating budget because we didn't have another fund set up to fund those projects with. This will allow us to keep operating in the operating budget and keep capital outside of the operating budget, making it easier for people to follow year over year what the actual increases or decreases to operating costs are. So that is the purpose of these articles. Not a single additional dollar will have to be raised through taxation. This is money that's already been collected through taxes and is set aside in an escrow account for the West Peterborough TIF District. To use this money, the selectmen will have to ensure that it is going towards a project that is allowed by the West Peterborough Tax and Increment Finance Plan that was adopted by Town Meeting 2004, and that will be reviewed by the trustee of the trust fund every time a request for reimbursement comes through to them.
Can this be applied to the fire station?
No, the fire station is not, the new fire station is not within the TIF district.
To save some time, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, yeah, I had a question about the TIFs. The assessed value got between 800 and 900 in non-TIF assessed value from the earlier slide. Let's go.
So the balance of the town's assessed valuation is what you saw on the previous slide. Without the TIF districts this year, it's $1.7 billion of assessed valuation for the total town.
So more than half the total assessed town valuation is tied up in TIFs?
No, not more than half, but there's a significant chunk that's in TIF districts. Most of the downtown is in the TIF district.
But it's not tied up.
If we were to build the fire station in a TIF district, couldn't we then apply those funds?
Yes, but we can't do that because it's not currently in a TIF district.
Right, and we would have to modify the plan, which would take another year.
And it wouldn't raise any money because there's no additional construction within a TIF district to capture. So because the fire station's not taxable, it's an improvement that wouldn't be captured. The way that they work so well is like West Peterborough TIF. West Peterborough TIF works great because the district was put in place before all the improvements in West Peterborough were put in place, including Broad Farm Road and Legacy Lane, the improvements to Union Mill, so on and so forth. It's a huge increase in taxable value there. And then that goes to pay down all that assessed valuation can then be used to pay down whatever costs were incurred for the TIF plan. That's going to close, West Peterborough TIF district's going to close in 2025. That's going to jack up the total assessed valuation.
So I'm just to make sure I'm following this correctly.
Yes.
If you're in a TIF,
Yes.
your incremental assessed value is
Yeah.
shielded from general town taxation because it's routed directly into the TIF.
No, no,
You
not
still
at all.
pay it.
You're still paying
But it can
it.
only be used within the TIF.
But the
But I guess my-
incremental can only be used within a TIF. Now, where it is shielded is from the school district, for instance. The school districts cannot use the TIF assessed valuation when they're constructing, the amount that they're billing out to the town. So you remember the school bills out in a blended formula based on total town valuation and total student population. So
I guess where I'm struggling is if I'm in a TIF
yes, so am I.
and I pay, if I actually don't even know that.
No, you're not in a TIF. You're on Elm Street.
Yeah, if I'm in a TIF and I'm paying like $10,000 a year for property taxes, a portion of that goes into the TIF.
Yep.
And therefore, when the town passes general warrant articles, such as the fire station, that falls on all of the property taxpayers that are not in the TIF.
It falls on taxpayers within the TIF as well. They pay the same tax rate.
Right. But you just said that revenue is protected.
Well, so for instance, my house had no addition put onto it after the TIF district was put in place. So 100% of my home's value is taxed just like everybody else's, regardless of where they are in town. Because my house, even though it is physically within the TIF district, there's no incremental valuation.
Right, but if you had built an addition on your house, which doubled the property value.
Correct.
Or you
Then it would have
developed a
been
new piece of-
captured. Right.
Then that new construction, since these
Would
TIFs
have
were
been captured
formed,
within the district, right?
and therefore are not attachable to subsidize the fire station.
Unless the selectmen vote to reduce the amount that's being captured by the TIF district, which they do every year when they go through the MS1. It's really complicated, but that's the short of it. So the selectmen can choose how much is being captured within the TIF district. So they can choose to capture $1, they can choose to capture $100 million, if it's available to be captured.
To save a little time, could we vote on all three at once? And then if there's any discrepancy, then we can go back and vote them separately. Is that fair?
I just had a quick follow-up question to that. How often have the select board members voted to not capture all of it in TIFs?
Almost every year before last year.
Okay, so some of it does get returned back to the general fund. Okay, cool.
Last year was the first time we fully captured the downtown TIF, and that was to make sure that we are being able to pay the Main Street Bridge bond payment out of the downtown TIF.
Thanks.
Any other questions? So could the select board vote on all three? We're unanimous on all three?
All three of them create a expendable trust fund for each of the TIFs, right?
Yes.
So they're basically the same language, different numbers.
What about the budget committee?
I would recommend.
Everybody in favor of all three, please say aye.
That's all three.
Okay, great. So all three are 8-1, I believe? So, cool. Is that fair?
All right, now here's the amended language. So bond counsel was finally able to take a look at the revised language of this warrant article this morning. In her defense, it's a very busy time of year for bond counsel. There's a lot of town meetings going on in March, so she was quite busy up until this week, but she finally got a chance to look at it. She made some recommended language changes, which does clarify the article itself. And so we also asked her to give us some language for using fund balance. So the $1.1 million of fund balance is built into it. So the total amount to be bonded would be $10,570,193, with the remainder of that to come from fund balance.
And 300.
And then to further raise and appropriate the sum of $305,000 for the first bond.
We don't have to add language in there about the money that's left over from the first?
We do not,
bond?
because it is for the same purpose. So we're not changing the purpose of the monies that were already raised through bonding.
But if we don't need to raise all of that because we have a couple $100,000 or whatever is left.
Yeah, which is why this isn't 12.1
It's accounted
million.
for.
Yeah.
Oh, so you've already accounted for that.
I did, yeah. Let me get
And
back
so we
to
don't
that.
need to say up to.
Yep.
We can just say 11 million. Okay.
That's,
Got it.
So this is projected to be a 20-year bond for 3.5%, is that correct?
that's what we're expecting, yes.
So, and just help me understand, in this scenario, what's the first full year bond payment?
The first full year bond payment, let me go back to that.
900.
The first full year bond payment was $898,466.
And what's the total to be raised and appropriated from taxation? 636?
On the,
305,000.
yeah.
No, for the whole, for the core budget.
For the general fund?
Yeah. So net of revenues and budget transfers. How did we get to the tax rate, I guess is my question. What's the total?
Here or on the other slide?
The
Is
other
that what
slide.
you- Okay. There we are.
Thank you.
Mhm.
All right, back to the egg.
Do we have to read through all of this again, or have we already pretty much covered everything?
It's really just a matter of, do you recommend it as currently written? Would you, or with the using of $1.1 million of fund balance, would you like to see a different amount of fund balance used? That'd be the first question. And then the second question would be, do you recommend this warrant article?
So we want to take a vote first about 1.1 million, if we're all in agreement, is that what you were saying?
Yes.
Essentially?
Yep.
I'm not, but I'm not gonna vote against the project because of it. I mean, I'd be happy with half. That would make me happier. Because of
Can we
the
maybe-
danger of the, I mean, we're talking about a significant dollar amount.
You were willing to spend it last year.
Andrew, I don't even really need to hear from you. If you've been so busy clapping away on your computer and then you chime in all of a sudden, thanks.
So is that a three vote to positive from the select board?
Well, I didn't exactly hear that, but I'm affirmative in to recommend 1.1. How do you?
Then I am
You
too.
don't have to.
I know
You
I
can
don't have
abstain,
to,
you
but
can
I'm not gonna
abstain.
tell every single taxpayer in town that I'm voting against the project just over that.
Well,
Well, you wouldn't be voting against the project. That's going to be a second.
But it would make
We're
a
just talking
statement.
Okay, well, then I am against that.
Okay, so 2-1 on using 1.1 fund balance.
How about
We'll check on the ballot, so.
No, we're not.
But it's, you know, it's in the minutes and it's, you know,
How's the budget
and it's
committee vote?
important.
All in favor of spending 1.1 million, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? So that's unanimous from the budget committee.
And then as far
Now
as
to the larger question.
give the bond, select board votes to recommend.
Yep.
3 ayes.
And how's the budget committee vote? All in favor, say aye. 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 Opposed? 8 to 1.
Okay.
So, just in case you missed it, the fire station public input
I know, right now, yeah. Hold on.
It doesn't even have the date on it. We all know the date.
March 27th. Oh, I gotta make sure it gets into the video because someone might be watching it again in the future. I'm looking for that date. It is March 27th.
There we go. Oh, yay.
At the Peterborough Library in the 1833 room at 6 p.m. Following that, on April 2nd, will be the deliberative session at 7 p.m. upstairs here in the upper hall. And then May 14th, the ballot session, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. in the community center off of Elm Street. And you can tour the proposed site of construction if you would like while you're there, or park on it as the case may be.
And just for clarification, for anybody that may actually be watching or view this later who's never voted or doesn't know how town meeting works, the deliberative session on the 2nd will be where we'll present all these articles that we've discussed. Yes.
Again.
Except for the fire station, and those will be voted on in the ballot session, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. on the 14th. And then the open session will include that fire station healthy discussion and voting in person with your paddle, not a paddle, with a ballot, over in the box and vote around for the count.
We also don't discuss the other bond issues in the
Bond
deliberative?
issue will get discussed on May 15th,
Right.
where it will also be voted on, and that'll be in the upper hall.
So deliberative is basically just discussing the budget? is that
The
fair
budget,
statement?
and then all those capital reserve.
The reserves,
Yeah.
And
But nothing
as
is
well
being
as
bonded.
and zoning.
All those warrants.
All those warrants.
Well, we don't talk about who's running for office at deliberative.
No.
Well, at both of those sessions, any of the warrants can be modified as well, so.
Yes, any of those articles can be amended.
Do we know what's happening with zoning amendments at this point in time, or is that still to be determined?
You should.
They're all in there.
We have a total of 5 that are going to move to ballot, 1 petition, and a possible 6th on March 11th. That's the last zoning amendment hearing.
Well, I'd just like to again thank Seth for his presentation tonight, and also the members of the building committee, really job well done the last couple of years, especially the last year. What you folks have done is remarkable. Appreciate everybody's patience tonight, and I think we accomplished a lot. Is there any other business before we talk about minutes?
Just in case anyone's wondering, March 7th is also the day that candidates can file for candidacy. So if you think your term might be up, check with Linda and she'll tell you whether or not it is.
27th.
The 27th, not the 7th.
27th, I'm sorry.
Oh,
what
you
did I
said
say?
the 7th.
You said
Did I
the
say,
7th.
no, I'm sorry, 27th. I think my voice is fading.
And what's the last day for people to file if they want to sit on the fence?
April 5th.
What day is the 27th?
It's the Tuesday.
Wednesday.
Wednesday, sorry.
The same night that we have the.
You have to have extra staff for all the
It's
people
the
that
same
are
night
running
we're
for
gonna be,
office. That day, don't
the
forget.
same night we're in the 1833 room talking about the fire station.
That's the first day, yeah. First
First
day.
day.
That's the
So you
same
can
day.
stop
can do
at
it
Linda's
before.
office and then make your way over to the
Linda,
library.
I'm not
can you
running
close
for nothing.
on Wednesday? What are your hours on Wednesday? the 27th?
8:30 to 5:30, Monday through Thursday, and on April 5th, which is the last day that you can file for candidacy, I'll be open from 3 to 5. Because we're not normally open on Fridays.
Yeah.
So don't wait till the last minute.
But if you didn't
Come in by the 4th.
Can they license their dog when they're signing
They
up for
can,
candidacy?
well, not on
Maybe
Fridays.
buy a cemetery plot while they're there?
Depends on the crowd.
I'm a multitasker.
So we have minutes to approve, was it joint budget and
So.
select board from,
Yep, there are joint select board budget committee minutes to approve for February 6th and February 13th. And then on February 6th, there was a purely select board portion before the joint portion.
so how should we vote?
I'd make a motion that we approve these select board minutes from those days.
Second.
All those in favor?
Yeah.
And I make a similar motion for approving the budget committee minutes for those days. Any discussion before we vote?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Great. Any other business? I will be adjourned this meeting, and thank you all again for all your patience.
Yeah, any budget.
Do you know who selected them off of the budget?